Howdy, everyone. All right, so I wanted to do a little bit of a, I guess you can call it an update video. You can call it whatever you want, I don't care. But before we get back to work on the tail section of the airplane, I've gotten some questions about my whole COVID status since I haven't been doing the dedicated videos. So just real quick, this is August 21st of 2020, and I am still not back at work. Like I said before, my other videos, my last day of work was back in March, so I am still not back, and as of today, there are no immediate plans to return. But, so yeah, that's that. And another thing I wanted to talk about was, you may have noticed that I'm starting to really jump around a lot. You know, I'm wiring wings, installing wing skins, and then I jump over to doing a manual flap conversion. I get part of the way through that, and then I jump over to working on tail pieces. You'll find when you get further along in your build that that's going to be more commonplace, because in order to finish one thing, you have to move on to something else, so ultimately you could put those two pieces together and do the finishing details on both. So you also find that when you are building something such as the wings, you may end up having to wait for a servo to show up like I did. You may have to wait for your lighting package to show up. And if you're like me, if you don't want to sit and do nothing while you wait, you move on to something else. And you'll get partway through that something else, and the items you were waiting for finally show up. And now you've got this that was waiting on parts is now ready to go, but you have that which is partially started, waiting to be finished. So I apologize for jumping all over the place. Initially I'd like to keep everything very, what do I want to say? What's the word I'm looking for? I want everything to flow nicely, as not so much as built, but you know, just what would make sense in a normal flow. You know, do all the wing stuff, do all the wing video segments, done. Do all the tail segments, done. Do the entire flap modification, done. But that's just not reality. So my wing servos, or the wing servo, the pitch and roll servo, have both showed up. So now I can get back to installing the servo on the wing, finish the wiring on the wing. Then the wing can go attached to the fuselage, and then I can go back to the flap mechanism modification. But now that I've started on the tail, I kind of want to finish the tail and then come back to the wing. But anyway, you'll find that when you get further along in your build, that's going to be a little bit more and more common for you to kind of jump around. So that's how I'm doing it, because I don't want to sit around and wait. So I move on to other things, and when I move on to other things, of course, I'm always going to videotape what I'm doing. So, and I post videos on my channel as I do them. So like I said, it might get a little choppy, jumping back and forth between wing, fuselage, tail, servos, wiring, soldering, whatever it is. So, all right, that's that. I'm going to wrap this up, and I'm going to get back to work on some tail work. As always, thanks for checking out my channel. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate the comments. Feel free to email me if you have comments or questions. And if you need some guidance on your own project, as always, feel free to email me. All right, talk to you later. All right, so we are back at the workbench. I've got the second hole drilled in my spacer. I've got it back on the horizontal. I've got the bolt through the existing hole through the horizontal stabilizer. Now that I've got this positioned where I want it, it's held somewhat in place with this bolt. Just make sure you have it positioned this way. And then it's just a matter of, as always, dropping down a drill bit, spinning it to mark the location, and then you can go ahead. There's the mark. So now I'll center punch that. Once I get it center punched, where'd it go? Just like I had done on the fuselage, and I had also used the wood block for this hole as well. So once again, I'll center punch the mark. I'll come back with the small drill bit and I'll just start that hole. I'll run the drill bit through the appropriate sized hole on my block. Then I'll locate the drill bit into that hole, clamp the wood block in place to keep the drill bit perpendicular, and then I'll go ahead and drill it. Take the drill out, go up to the next size drill bit, drill this hole slightly, put the drill bit in the block, position the drill into that partially drilled hole, clamp the block, drill the hole. Take the bit out, go to the final size drill bit, pre-drill that ever so slightly, put the drill bit in the block, position the drill into that slightly drilled hole, clamp the block, drill the hole. By the time you're done, you'll have two holes that are nice and perpendicular. You'll have two holes here that are nice and perpendicular. And I guarantee you when you put the plate down, those two bolts will go right through the plate, right through your horizontal stabilizer aluminum bar, and they will be perfectly positioned exactly where you want them. All right, let me go through that process and I'll come back. Howdy everyone. Alrighty, so you can see I've got the horizontal back up on the fuselage. I've got it clamped in the back. I've got a temporary spacer underneath the rear spar right here. Spacer at this point is not critical. I just put it in there to keep it a little bit closer to real world type of scenario, because the instructions say ultimately you're going to have to shim it to get this height correct before you drill these pieces. But I'm not there yet. All I'm worried about right now are getting these bolts situated. But to aid with alignment, I just put a shim in there temporarily. So that's in. Of course, we've got the holes already drilled through the longeron, through this support and down through the longeron, and a bolt to help keep it in place. Same thing on this side. The bolt is in, going through the longeron. I've done my measurements. So now the horizontal is perfectly square to the fuselage. And again, that was measured from the corner of the firewall all the way across to this first rivet here on the horizontal. So now that the horizontal is set where it needs to be and I've got it clamped, all I need to do now is transfer these holes, the second hole, into the fuselage. Now I can't get a standard size drill bit in here, it's too long. So I'm using this little center drill. It's just a little countersink and it happens to be 3/16 in diameter. So it fits nicely into the hole. And then I just spin it to make a mark onto the fuselage. Now that I've done that for both of these holes, I'll take this off, get the horizontal out of the way, and then using my block of wood and the various size drill bits, I'll come back and I'll clamp my wood in place and I'll drill these holes out to final size. And at that point, I can come back and I'll fit the horizontal, the spacers that we just made that go in here, and the 4 bolts. And I'll bolt this down. And then at that point, I'll start shimming it here to set the incidence angle of the entire assembly. Now the incidence angle is supposed to be 0 degrees. The instructions tell you that you can use these lightning holes. There's a lightning hole here. There's one up here. And then there are 2 more here and here. They say you could use those lightning holes as a reference to set this angle to 0. Now if you remember, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but this deck plate here is 0. That should be this deck point, which basically is riveted to the longeron. The longeron, when you level the fuselage, you level the longeron. So this entire length here should all be 0 degrees. Now, I'm not sure how I'm going to use these lightning holes as a reference. Like I said, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but when we get there, we'll talk about it. For now, let me get these holes drilled. Let me get the spacers put in. Let me get the bolts put in. Let me get this mounted, and then we'll figure out what to do with getting the angle of incidence set. Howdy, everyone. All right, so I've got both bolts in place now on both sides. Got the spacer in place on both sides. And I've got these bolts snugged with nuts up underneath. So this is actually bolted in place. I got what I am using for shims, which are 2 drill bits. These are both 3/16 inch drill bits underneath the spar as per the instructions. I double check just to make sure that the fuselage is level in both X and Y axis, or X and Y, however you want to look at it, but the fuselage is level. I put a level across here, and this matches the fuselage, so this is level, and it's level with the fuselage. Again, the spacers are in place, the drill bits, spacers are in place here, bolts are in. So now, and I've also, again, checked yet again the distance from the corner of the firewall back to this rivet here on the horizontal on both sides, and those measurements are the same. So now, all I'm going to do, like I always do, I'm going to run a drill bit through here and through here on both ears, and then take everything apart, and I'll drill the rear spar to size, and then I'll come back and I'll enlarge these holes to full size, and then I'll put everything back together and make sure that I can get bolts through those holes. And if they're a little tight, or if I can't, they're not quite wanting to fit, I can just match drill at that point. So let me get that done. Hopefully it will work, and I'll get all this put back together, and then I believe it's time to start working on the vertical stabilizer. So good times. All right, talk to you soon. Howdy, everyone. Well, the horizontal stabilizer is now back on the airplane, and it is completely bolted in place. Let me point out a couple things to look for. So the 4 bolts that I just drilled that attach the horizontal stabilizer to these vertical uprights, I'll show these from the other side in a minute. So here's a bolt. There's 1, 2, and then this one back here is 3, and that one there is 4. You can see that they're pretty much centered on this reinforcement strap here. They're pretty much centered very nicely. If they're not exactly centered, that's okay, but you can see there's plenty of edge distance between the bolt and the edge of those straps. So I am more than pleased with that. That came out really nice. And you can see that the gap between the edge of the deck plate here and the horn and this edge here and this horn, those are equal. And again, you want to look at all kinds of different visual cues that you can to make sure that everything is symmetric and everything is where it needs to be. You can even look at this gap here. You can see the blue floor between the edge of the longeron here and the edge of the elevator here. You can see that this gap in here is the same as this gap in here. Different things of that nature. You can look at how these inside ribs, how they run nice and parallel to the deck plate, and the spacing between the deck plates and this rib should basically be the same as this side. Different things to look at just to put your mind at ease that things are true and equal. So here's the straps, or the two vertical pieces from the other side. And again, here are the 4 bolts, here, 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 and here. And you can see how the bolts are centered on the strap on both sides. Plenty of edge distance, everything is really nice. Of course, the gap between the deck plate and the bottom of the spar, that's 3/16 of an inch. That was already set up using the drill bits. And then, as I've already talked about, the 4 bolts up here. You've got 2 on this side with the spacer underneath. And there are 2 more on this side here with the spacer underneath. And again, these are bolted down in place. These are snug. And again, the deck plate of the fuselage is level. I put a level across this and it's level. And like I said, I had the gap set back here with the 3/16 drill bit. And then the final check, as always, from the corner of the firewall back to this first rivet. And I'm happy to say that both measurements on both sides, they are exactly the same. And I do mean they are exact. Down to that dimple, that little dimple that's in the center of that rivet. They are exactly the same. Not even a 16th off. They are exact. Took a lot of work. I basically been working on this for 2 days. I just got it finished. But it was worth it because everything came out just about perfect. So more than pleased. Next up, I believe, is making the push rod that goes in the fuselage through here. That connects to the elevator horn out to the belt crank that's in this area. I believe that's next. And then after that, I think, is running the manual trim cable. All right, so that's it for now. When I get moving on something else, I will record it and talk to you guys later.